Jay Croucher here with Connor Rogers, the hardest working man in showbiz around the draft. Connor has up on NBCSports.com a proper tome, a Russian novel of all 32 teams graded for the draft, a proper Britannica. We're going to go through some of the notable highest and lowest grades for the draft here. Let's start off with the positive side, the highest grades. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers had somewhat of a controversial draft, taking Emeka Egbuka and putting him in that loaded wide receiver room, but you love their draft.
I do, and basically how I grade these drafts are if you have less picks, like we're not factoring in the trades, we're factoring in the draft haul, the value based on my big board and how you attack your needs. I look at the Bucs, they got an A for me, and I think this was the only actual A I gave out. A couple A-minuses across the board, but a sturdy A for the Bucs. Emeka Egbuka, one of the safest players in this draft. Down the road, when Chris Godwin starts to slow down, he can be the Chris Godwin of this offense. But for now, you're going to get an extremely high-end number 3 wide receiver, and if one of those older wide receivers gets hurt, he's ready to step up into a bigger role. But it's about what they did after Egbuka as well. Benjamin Morrison, the 2023 tape, was quality of a first-rounder. He had the hip surgery this year, so we have to see how he bounces back from that. Jacob Parrish, the corner out of Kansas State, was one of my guys in this draft. He's smaller, but he's fast. He's sticky in coverage. He does a really good job with awareness and playing the football. And then an FCS star in David Walker, pass rusher, kind of reminded me of Carl Lawson, that compact frame, under 6 feet 1 inch. He's somebody that plays at 260, 265, but he's agile. He's got hip flexibility. He can kind of bend into the pocket, but he can also drive his hands into you to push the pocket as well. So the Bucs just did and then they doubled down on that with Elijah Roberts, another really productive pass rusher. Tez Johnson's a lighter wide receiver, but we'll see what he could do in a depth role. But man, Jason Light just understands, Jay, how to attack value of the draft board and how it's going to fall year after year.
Yeah, incredible after the Brady era ended for them to be now just entrenched as the team in the NFC South. They are the favorites to win that division once again. Let's jump to the Detroit Lions, who eliminated the Bucs from the playoffs a couple of years ago. They built on their strength, really fortifying that offensive line.
That is what the Lions do. They have an identity and they stick to it, and they know how to replenish it. You think of all the injuries they had on the defensive front last year. Well, Tyleik Williams now next to Aleem McNeil. It's going to be really, really hard to run against the Detroit Lions. And when you look at the NFC, how it's built, you got to deal with the Eagles. You're going to have to deal with the Commanders. You're going to deal with multiple teams that are built on establishing the run to open up the pass. Tyleek's going to stop that. But then you look at what they did at guard in a couple of different picks. Tate Ratledge from Georgia, multi-year starter, high-end player at right guard for that Georgia offensive line. This was a big need for the Lions, and they didn't stop there when they got Miles Frazier, a guy I valued in the top 100. They got him later on in the draft. He's that powerhouse, heavy-handed downhill blocker, and I'm really intrigued by Isaac Tesla in this offense. He played in the slot for Arkansas, but he's about 6'4". Big frame, explosive speed, really good acceleration out of the gate. I wonder if he could transition to the outside in this Detroit offense, give them a deep threat, and even do some stuff under the after the catch underneath as well. So for the Lions with this draft, they just routinely stick to their identity under Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, and that's why they were able to have sustainable success.
Yep. Lions, as you expect, one of the 5 Super Bowl favorites. Another one of those top 5 contenders, the Baltimore Ravens, who feel like they nail the draft every year, one of the best organizations in football.
They really do. They have an infrastructure that understands the draft and how to accumulate assets with compensatory picks. And once again, your grade has a chance of being better if you were able to accumulate picks to make a bigger and better draft haul. Look at this draft haul from the Ravens. This is one of the bigger classes, but they did get value. Malachi Starks, they had a lot of problems on the back end of their defense last year. Malachi Starks, his ability on the back end, very fluid mover, smart, aware, instinctive, a true free safety that could also play the slot for you if needed. Mike Green was a top 10 player for me based on talent in this draft. He is one of the best pure pass rushers in this draft. Reminded me of Harold Landry, and they needed a pure pass rusher on the edge, a stand-up guy that could also play with his hand in the dirt. You look at getting a developmental tackle in Carson Vincent from Alabama A&M. The Ravens love putting talented offensive linemen that are a bit raw in their pipeline and allowing them to grow behind the scenes for a year or two and then taking over as a starter. So that was a good piece of business by the Ravens. And the last pick that stands out to me is Aeneas Peebles from Virginia Tech. He's undersized. He's not very athletic, but he's a pass rush artist from the interior. If you go on 3rd and longs and you need an interior rusher to pin his ears back and go, you see the swipes, the spins, the cross chop. He understands counter moves. Aeneas Peebles will carve out a role in their defensive line rotation.
Yep. Feels like the Ravens for years now have been having to manufacture these pass rushes through smoke and mirrors and simulations, and to just go get a guy like Mike Green who can just get after the quarterback. Let's jump to the lowest grades. The New Orleans Saints had one of the loudest drafts, but you don't think they had one of the best.
And it's not a bad draft as a whole in terms of some of the positions they attacked. I like Kelvin Banks. I'm excited about potentially the left side of the offensive line in New Orleans with Taliza Fuanga and Kelvin Banks, depending where they play certain guys. But at the end of the day, Jay, what is this draft going to be judged on? Tyler Shough at pick 40, right? That's what it comes down to in this spot, is that Shough is now probably the future of their franchise. He's had a lot of injuries in college, a long college career, 7-year college career. He's an older prospect. What you see is what you get. He's got a big arm, but there's just mistakes on film. I don't think he's a great athlete. He's adequate as an athlete, but the injuries is what scares me for a team that they're starting quarterback in Derek Carr. His injuries are mounting as well. So I like Quincy Riley down the board. I thought in 2023 in man coverage, he was phenomenal. This year, he was not the same player, dealing with what looked like an ankle injury. So they got some talent, but at the end of the day, this draft is going to be judged on what the plan was at getting better at quarterback, and I'm not a believer in it.
Yep, a lot of uncertainty going forward for New Orleans. Also a lot of uncertainty for the Minnesota Vikings, which is strange to say about a team that went 14-3 last year, but new quarterback, and you didn't love their draft.
And I still am a big believer in Minnesota. They're going to be great under Kevin O'Connell. This was kind of, paying off the credit card bill. They traded a lot of future picks in the previous draft, so they didn't have a lot of picks to work with, which it's going to affect your grade in my system. So we went with the C-. Donovan Jackson's a really good pick because he's plug and play at guard. He had to play some tackle after Josh Simmons got hurt for Ohio State this year. He's not a pro tackle. He can get by in a pinch there, but his athleticism in the zone running game at guard is what really stands out to me. But honestly, Jay, this might be a one-player draft. Kobe King's the other guy that stands out to me because he's a thumper at linebacker that can be a real bruiser on special teams for you. Ty Felton's play strength has got to get better, although maybe they believe they can get him into their program and get that from him because they have depth at wide receiver already. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins is a big athlete, but he's very, very raw coming out of that Georgia program. You just always worry when it's a potential one-player class, but that's kind of the battle you're dealing with when you've traded a lot of picks in the past. Donovan Jackson will be a good pro.
Okay, our final team, and one of the most compelling teams going into this season, San Francisco 49ers, who go from one play away from winning the Super Bowl to missing the playoffs entirely. So this is a huge year for them. They have a lot of needs, and you didn't think they had the best draft.
I didn't love the reaches. That's my big problem with the Niners in this situation, is that you had a lot of assets, and what did we look at with the Niners? Well, let's get better up front on both sides of the ball. The offensive line, they whiffed on that. They just didn't attack it with aggression. And it's one thing if the board just didn't fall your way, but they reached a lot. Mykel Williams, listen, he's a really high-floor run defender. Maybe the pass rush green light will turn on in a system under Robert Saleh where they know how to develop pass rushers there, but he's really far away for a top 15 pick. Alfred Collins is a phenomenal run defender. I like that pick a lot. But they went into this draft, Jay, so hell-bent on stopping the run with Mykel, Alfred Collins, C.J. West, and then they kind of forgot we don't really have a great or deep offensive line right now. Nick Martin was a huge reach for me in this draft. He was hurt this year. He's an undersized linebacker. Upton Stout is scrappy at corner, but once again, another undersized guy. I like Jordan James at running back, but we know this team can find a running back at any point at any draft. I just didn't really understand how they were playing the board, and when I walked out of the Niners draft or big picture look at it, I said, okay, how can this offensive line improve and get deeper and injury-proof? They didn't address that at all. I'm a little worried about Brock Purdy in that situation.
Yep, a lot of question marks for the 49ers. No question marks about Connor Rogers, one of the best in the business. You can check out all of these draft grades, all 32 teams at NBCSports.com. Good stuff as always, Connor.